I'll tell you a story, Joe. I was in Myanmar late last year, and we're down there filming this thing, and this kid, like 22-year-old crab fisherman, gets bitten by a crocodile.
Oh.
Croc grabs him by the arm, grabs him by the thigh, and death rolls. So it breaks the arm in 15 places, compound fracture, the real deal. I can show you pictures of it. It'll blow your mind. And we hear about this, and we're minutes away. It's kind of one of the similar situations where we're the first Westerners to be there in a long time. We go bombing over at high speed, and we get there, and the mom is off mourning the death of her child, but her child is sitting there still alive. They have written him off. And mom is literally mourning the death of her child, and he's lying there conscious, but in total shock. Fortunately, just because of the situation, we had a speedboat, everything else. We bandaged him up, tried to keep his arm stable and his leg stable, put him in our speedboat, and it was 6 hours by speedboat to a village that to a hospital, really. And so he got there, and his life was saved. But we asked the people in the village, what were you going to do? And they're like, there's nothing we can do.
Wow.
So he was just going to bleed out or go septic, and that was the end of it.
Ooh, what a fucking rough way to go.
Right.
Ooh. How did he get away from the crocodile?
I don't know. I think he was just hitting it or hammering on it. He was crab fishing in the water, and it came up and grabbed him, rolled a few times, and at some point he escaped. How he even got back in the boat and made it back to the village, I have no idea, because his leg was shattered, his arm was shattered. It was brutal. And it was a canoe, it wasn't like he had a little motor or a wheel to drive. He canoed back.
We had this idea of the Neanderthals as unsuccessful, right?
Right.
They were these brutish thugs that died out. But they had a 600,000 year run.
Yeah.
In Europe alone. 600,000 years.
Longer run than Homo sapiens have actually existed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
whatever's
I don't know
next-
that we're going to hit, I don't know that we're going to match up and have that run.
Well, we'll probably have a 23andMe for whatever the fuck is after us. And then look, somebody back then fucked a human. Ugh.
It was incredible. The jungle there. So we were in Colombian Amazon, and talk about untouched by people. There's been this kind of ongoing conflict in Colombia for many, many years. So we were the first Westerners to go there in over 60 years. So the village we flew into, they'd literally never seen white people before. And then we went 200 kilometers from that. So middle of nowhere.
Did they want to touch you?
Yeah, hair. Because their hair was very dark and very different. And I'm not particularly fair, but just to touch the hair and see the blue eyes and stuff, they were just
were they
loving
friendly?
it. Super friendly. The culture was very stoic. There wasn't a lot of smiling or crying. There wasn't a lot of emotional exchange. But straight away they came and greeted us, shook hands, said hello. It was really cool.
Wow.
This stuff is new, so having
Really?
alcohol that's this strong is something we've only had for a couple hundred years.
Really?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize that. So for most of our history, we've been drinking 2 to 3% beers.
2 to 3%.
Yeah, historically it's typically what beers came in at. Grape wines you could get up to 8 to 10, but there's a built-in limit to natural fermentation. So the yeast are turning sugars into alcohol, which is a poison. So the yeast are slowly poisoning themselves, basically. And we've bred these super hardy yeast. So nowadays you can get an Australian Syrah up to 16% ABV.
Wow.
Which is high, historically really unprecedented. But
That's crazy.
That's as high as you can get, because then the alcohol shuts down the yeast. But a way around that is distillation. So you take that wine, you heat it up. Ethanol is really volatile, so that comes off first. And if you could figure out how to capture that vapor and turn it back into a liquid, you've got this. You've got really concentrated alcohol.
Do they do that with wine?
They do it with wine, or they'll take something that's naturally fermented, so a weak beer or a wine, and then they distill it.
And what do they call that when they get it on the other end?
Distilled liquor. That's what liquor is.
Oh, okay. So it's just a kind of liquor?
Yeah, so liquor or spirits refers to something that's been distilled. So
Right.
you've basically extracted the alcohol out of the mixture and made it into a pure form. And once you do that, you've got 90, you can get some vodkas could be 90-something% ABV. So that's crazy strong. It's just really, we're not equipped to, what you're talking about, it needs to be modulated. It was always modulated historically by the fact that we were drinking beers that weren't very strong. So there's going to be just volume limit to how much you can consume. is also modulated by social stuff. So we're drinking typically, historically, in a communal situation where there's really clear ritual restrictions on drinking. So you only drink when someone makes a toast. You're modulating your drinking with other people. And even, you think about just even in a pub, you don't just drink as much as you want. You order rounds.
Right.
And if you down your beer real fast, you got to wait until everyone else is ready to order another round. So we socially regulate our drinking, and then it's been regulated by its inherent weakness, if you want to think of it that way. But then all of a sudden you get this kind of stuff. You get really strong liquors, and you can have that in your house. That's when alcohol gets really dangerous.
And it's only been the last couple hundred years.
Yeah, distilled liquors weren't, because the concept's really simple. Aristotle described distillation, but technologically it's really hard to do because you have to have metallurgy. You need to be able to heat liquids and keep them at a certain temperature.
That makes sense.
They're pressurized. It's actually kind of dangerous. So in Prohibition, when people created stills at home, it was like early 20th century version of meth labs. They were constantly exploding, and people were like getting scalded with hot liquid because it's dangerous. So it's hard to do. So we only mastered it. I'm telling an evolutionary story. So my story begins 10 million years ago with primate ancestors who adapted to alcohol. And so 10 million years ago, about 20,000 years ago to 13,000 years ago, we start making alcohol seriously, not just relying on fruit lying around that has some alcohol in it. And then distillation happens probably around 1300s in China and 1600s in Europe. So that sounds like a long time ago, but really, evolutionarily, it's yesterday. We really haven't had time culturally or genetically to adapt to access to this kind of alcohol.